Okay, girls, hello, boys, how are you? All of you students, both girls and boys. Today we're going to be seeing the 6th century after Christ. So the transformations are going to be more or less three. If we could characterize it really simply, it is going to be going from this map over here to this map over here, and I am going to run the slides fast just for you to see that the last state of this century is going to be this transformation over here. So we're going to have three transformations from this map to this map, and from this map to where is it, to this map over here. That is going to be the big transformation. That is going to be the big process in this century. But how does it work? Let me explain you over here. First, let me erase the writings that I have over here, because I had already recorded this class, but I think that I may be more clear if I do it again. So here we go. Well, first of all, I want us to consider that we were working with this theory for the 5th century. As I always tell you, rather than a theory, it is a hypothesis. As I always tell you, history is a science, and as a science, history works with hypotheses, and we can rethink those hypotheses, and we can propose new hypotheses, better hypotheses, or perhaps not such better hypotheses. But we may discuss it in order to always try to get the best quality knowledge in history that we may get. So what is the first hypothesis that we presented, and the one that we worked with last class? It is this one, in which the century starts in 410 and ends in 476. And why in 476? Because it is going from the sack of Rome in the hands of Alaric the Visigoth to the moment in which Odoacer deposes Romulus Augustus, that was the last emperor of Rome, the last emperor of Rome de facto, because we're going to have another emperor of Rome by that time, that is by juris. That means by the law. The Eastern Empire and most of the Roman institutions are going to be recognizing this other emperor, but the emperor, the real emperor, the one that is going to be holding the power, is going to be Romulus Augustus. But we will see that difference in just a moment. So the main transformation is going to, this one is not going to change between the two hypotheses. It is the Western Roman Empire. It starts with this, and the other peoples were the foederati, that are paying military services, and it ends like this, with the barbaric kingdoms being established. So this is a hypothesis that you have in your notebooks and perhaps in your cards, that is centered in the Western Roman Empire. And you may use either of these hypotheses. Both of them would be correct. The only thing is that I want you to really be able to say why they are different and why you're choosing one above the other. It is not just because this is the one that I remember about. No, you need to tell me, I choose the hypothesis based on the Western Roman Empire because I do believe that the century ends when Odoacer deposes Romulus, because he was the last emperor de facto. This means that he was the last emperor that was really ruling the Western Empire. Or you may tell me, no, I think that the century actually ends 10 years later. Instead of in 476, it is going to end in 486, so it is going to be 10 years longer, because the century is not going to end with Odoacer deposes Romulus, but rather when Clovis defeated Syagrius. But who is Clovis and who is Syagrius? Well, that is what we're going to see in this class. First of all, you have to take into consideration that now we will be talking about the Franks, and that is one of the main reasons because of which these two hypotheses may be really, really different. Because if you remember, everything we saw in the 5th century is going to be about the Visigoths, but now I am going to present this hypothesis in which the century ends when the Visigoths stop being the most important people of the time defeating the Roman Empire, and when we see the Franks arising as the most important or more powerful foederati or former foederati, a barbaric kingdom rather by that time, arising by those days. So, if you remember, then in the 5th century, we saw how Alaric was going to, actually sacked Rome and invaded Italy, and then his successor, Athaulf, is going to be staying in Gaul, and he's going to be manipulating a lot the emperor of Rome. He's going to be trying to back other emperors in order to defeat Honorius, that was the Roman Empire by that time. He was married to his sister because Alaric stole her when he sacked Rome, and then came Balia, and Balia is going to go towards Hispania, and he's going to try to recover it for Rome, because all these peoples, the Suevians, the Vandals, the Alans, are going to be invading Hispania, that was a Roman territory, and so Balia is going to return into the service of Rome. It is going to become again a foederati, and he's going to be defeating these peoples over here. And finally, remember that Theodoric was the one that was Theodoric the First was the one able to defeat Attila, that was attacking from this huge empire in orange that you can see here. He was attacking both the Eastern Empire over here. Remember, in this region called Minor Asia, they are going to be fighting Attila, but also in the east, in the Western Empire, and again as part of the foederati, and that means as again paying military services towards Rome in order to live in their territory. That by that time is just going to be this small red region over here. In order to live there, they are paying military services towards Rome, and their service was to defeat Attila, and Theodoric was able to defeat Attila. He was able to defeat this great and feared general, and actually Attila died only 2 years after the Catalonian Plains battle, in which Theodoric I is going to defeat Attila. And then Theodoric II again is going to be suffering a great loss, because they had expanded their territory. The Visigoths had expanded their territory all the way into this region in the south over here, from Valence to Saragossa, and again the Roman Empire is going to take that region away from them. So Rome again is going to be ungrateful with the Visigoths, because after all they were the only ones able to defeat Attila. So sorry about that. So after Theodoric II is going to be losing this battle in the hands of Rome, the Roman emperors are going to win. Then the next Visigothic king, Euric, is going to live by the time that the Roman Empire falls. This is he's going to live when when Odoacer defeats Romulus Augustus, and then he's going to expand their territory, the Visigothic territory, all the way down to the Hispanic Peninsula, all the way towards Spain, except for this part that is going to belong to the Suevians until the 6th century. Actually, by the 6th century, that is the century that we're going to study today, the Visigoths were able to conquer the Suevians over here. But by this time, Euric only had this part of France and this part of Spain. So as you can see here, the whole history of the 5th century is defined for what the Visigoths are doing. If the Visigoths are sacking Rome, that is going to start the century. If Ataulf is over here, then he's going to be manipulating the power, and Balia is going to be recovering territory for in Spain for the Romans, and then Theodoric the Visigoth is going to be defeating Attila, and Theodoric II is going to be losing territory in the hands of Rome, and Euric is going to be founding this great Visigothic kingdom. So everything in the 5th century is defined by what the Visigoths are doing, okay? But by the 6th century, that is not going to be the case, because if you see over here, there is a huge difference between this map over here that is going to have Spain and France, and this map over here in which they only have Spain and this and only this little strip of France, right? It is very different. And why? Because the Visigoths are going to be advancing. So this is what is going to be happening. Sorry, we're going to start studying this, but this is why the Visigoths are just going to stay with this region, because the Franks are going to be expanding all the way as follows. But let me explain you with more clarity. So also before we get to that point, I want to tell you that there is also a big transformation over here, because as I was telling you, well, the Visigoths were all the 5th century, but in the 6th century, what we're going to have is that the Franks are going to become the most important peoples of the century. At least for the first half of the century, the Franks are going to be the ones that are growing and that are really having well, the other peoples rather are going to be paying their respect towards the Franks, because they became really powerful. But there is not only that shift, that is not the only change. Going from the Visigoths to the Franks is not just changing of peoples, because even remember that over here, Athaulf was living in this Frank territory. So the territory is not the only important thing. The peoples that are going to be living is not the only important thing. But there is also something great, something huge of great social importance that should be really be taken into consideration if we are going to be talking about the social transformations. And remember that that is what we study. We study time, so that is change, and we study how the social structures, the product of societies, is going to be changing in time. Remember that that's what we said, that means the doing of men in time. So this great change is going to come from Alaric the Visigoth to Alaric the Second, that is going to be defeated by Clovis the First. But these were Visigoths, and Visigoths were by the 5th century the most important people. And then it came the Franks. But together with these changing peoples and these changing territories also came a changing religion, because there is something very important. They were Christians. All the way from the 4th century, the Roman Empire is Christian. It was declared by the Eastern Empire that Rome should be Christian, but Christianism wasn't a unified front. There were different ways of thinking of Christianity, and actually that made up different religions within Christianity. So that's a very important difference, because the Visigoths were the most important people in the 5th century, and the Visigoths were Christian, but they were Arian. This means they followed Arius, and the religion was Arianism, and that is a Christian religion, but it is very different from the Catholic religion, and the Franks are going to be Catholic. So that is going to be really important in history, trust me. When we arrive to Charlemagne, this relation between the Franks and Catholicism is going to be very important. Actually, the Pope is going to declare that the Roman Empire had been born again with Charlemagne, and that is because of his relation with Catholicism. So that is also a very important a very important change in the century. We do not only have a change of tribes, we do not only have a change of ethnicity in the center of the century. The center of the 5th century were the Visigoths, and in the 6th century it is the Franks. But that also brings with it a change in religion, because the Arian religion, the religion of Arius, was really powerful by that time, and then it is going to be losing power towards Catholicism until it finally disappears within the Visigoths. But what is this difference between the Arian religion and the Catholic religion? Well, in the 4th century, we can say that our religion, Catholicism, really started, because it was actually with a Roman emperor, and that is Constantine. Constantine from the Eastern Empire declared Rome as to be Christian. If you remember this book that you read, The City of God, Saint Augustine is defending Christianism, because after Alaric sacked Rome, and that is why it was really important for you to read that book and to understand that book, because it is explaining these transformations in society. Remember that Alaric was sacking Rome, and he was seen as as a barbarian. But Rome had very recently become Christian. So remember that Saint Augustine is defending Christianism because the people in Rome is saying that the eternal city, that Rome, had fell because they had converted into Christianism, because they believed that only the ancient gods were able to really protect them, and that during the time that they followed the ancient gods, that they didn't have any issues. But once they renounced their ancient gods and they